So here it is with the pad. And then without it. Hear how the floor kind of drops a little bit. The Skyrim soundtrack has been a big inspiration for me and a lot of other composers looking to write kind of fantasy, epic orchestral music. And what I thought would be kind of fun to do is to take a listen to one of my favorite tracks, Far Horizons, and study it a little bit, but then kind of write our own piece similar to Far Horizons in Logic Pro. Doing this process of studying and then applying the things that you've learned is a very, very quick and fast and effective way to internalize orchestration, composition, and other elements of the music that you love. And by the end of this, hopefully you'll be able to write your own piece like Jeremy Soule, like Far Horizons. Now, this is the first time I'm trying this kind of video approach on this channel, so if you find this interesting and useful and you want to see more of this, you can leave a like and subscribe for more, and I'll be sure to do more in the future. Okay, I'm super excited about this. So first things first, let's just give a listen briefly to maybe the first minute or so of the Skyrim soundtrack. Now, this is definitely going to get this video demonetized, and it is what it is, so if you want to support me, you can buy me a coffee in the description. So we're starting off with just horns and strings, you notice? Little harp in there. And we had a cymbal swell for the transition. Strings and horns playing the melody together at the octave. Flute run. Now there's some counterpoint going on in the cello. We'll talk about that. Okay, we're just gonna work with that because that's plenty to work with for now. Now, really important when you're studying this kind of stuff to take it in bite-sized chunks. If you try and digest the entire Skyrim soundtrack or an entire symphony, you're just simply not gonna get the same level of internalization of the material. So I like to work in small chunks. Honestly, I usually even work shorter than this, maybe 20-second increments, or sometimes even just 5 seconds if it's really dense, complex orchestration. So we're just starting with this minute. And I kind of outlined some of the things, but just to kind of reiterate, we basically have an ensemble that's primarily horns and strings, string ensemble. There are some little touches of extra instruments in there, and if you can't hear that, it's okay. Jeremy Soule did a really good job of blending these instruments together with the orchestration, so it's kind of difficult to parse the different instruments together, but I believe in the second half, we're getting some brass introduced, some trombones in the lower register, just to add a little bit of extra weight. And the reason I know that is partially because of what I'm hearing, but also just classic orchestral tropes and devices that are used. So that's my assumption on why it sounds denser. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of make our own piece based on this. Now, we'll start with my ensemble, and I'm using my orchestral template, which I've talked about in other videos. I'll link that in the description if you're interested. But I'm mostly going to be using Cinematic Studio Series stuff, as well as some afflatus strings, and potentially some percussion from True Strike. Doesn't really matter what you use. That's not what's important here. Now, before I actually go and start to orchestrate, I'm actually going to compose the piece using a piano reduction. That's kind of an effective way to get ideas out. Now, I'm not going to work with a tempo either because I want the tempo to be kind of flexible. So we'll start with no tempo and then adapt the tempo, which I'll show you in a second. So one of the characteristic elements of his music is inversions. So he likes to use inversions quite a bit. Also playing with register is important. We're going to try and keep the register. So in Jeremy Soule's piece, he's kind of doing... We're gonna kind of keep the same color more or less and the same range. That helps so we don't have to do too many things differently. So let's change the key. Actually, let's start in F. Keep the range, and I'm just gonna adjust some chords a little bit and see what I can come up with. So let's try Okay, start with something like that, see if I can remember it. So I'll play it in. Okay, and we're actually just going to orchestrate that because that's plenty to work with. Now what I like to do is I have this set in Logic as the tempo that I want, but we have to adapt this tempo so it's proper. It makes it easier for editing. You don't have to actually have a tempo going, but when you're quantizing and things like that, it just makes this easier. So I like to lock this to SMTPE. You can do that with right-clicking. Not too important. We're not going to get into that too much. I've done that in other videos. And then I'm just going to essentially beat map this. I find that the easiest way to do this, although there are other methods too. So we're first just going to lock in this. Our next tempo change is going to be here on the next beat. So just beat mapping in real time. And that should be enough to work with. So it should all be ready to go. So now we can just kind of mute this if we want to, or if we can keep it up for reference, that's fine too. Now let's start with the main instrument. The important thing with orchestration is that you kind of work from the important textures backwards. I found that to be very helpful, and it just makes it a lot faster. So we're gonna start with the French horn. Now I like to use my breath controller. You can use whatever you want, a fader if you like to draw things in, that's fine too. We're just gonna get the melody. This is kind of pushing it in the melody, the register for the horn. That's pretty high up there, but it's similar to Jeremy Soul's. He actually goes up to that D. And we're just going up to C. So it'll be okay. So let's start by getting that melody. Okay, now you might notice that I actually dropped a little piece of the melody, and that's because I know that the horn player needs to breathe. Now this is really important, but for good orchestration, you gotta make sure that you're actually thinking like they're real players. You can't have sustained lines where people couldn't breathe forever. So very important that you focus on that. Now I'm gonna just quantize everything here, and I have some tricks for that, which maybe I'll go over in another video at some point, but not in this one. Okay. Make sure we have that breath in here, which should be right here. Okay. And then I'm just going to do a little bit of finessing with these starting notes, which helps that entrance. Okay, let's check this out. Make sure it's close. Okay, I'd like that to be a little bit longer at the end here. Maybe just draw that like this. And these need to be a little bit pushed forward even more. So we'll try that. That's good. Now that has to do with the delays, which again, we're not going to talk about in this video. Now, let's focus on the strings. So I'm going to recap what Jeremy Soule did with the strings on his piece. I'm going to actually give this a quick listen to see kind of what's going on. Just in the beginning. So on the top and on the bottom, we have sustained notes. Whatever it takes to kind of hold the notes, whatever the note position needs to be. So that there was very little movement. It might sound like they're muted as well, I'm not sure. But it sounds like the general register is something like with the lower octave. So I'm going to start off by using sustain patches instead of trying to divide everything up. And I'm going to move into my key. So we're using... We'll start with just the sustains, and then we'll figure out how to distribute this. Okay. Okay, now this is kind of placeholder for now. Now I had to breathe in here, so we're just gonna draw right over that. And this just helps us to make sure we're getting our voicings correct. Now one thing I noticed is I actually don't wanna go to that C chord so early in this piece. This part. So I'm gonna change that chord, because I think that's kind of powerful when we save it. So let's maybe change this to C minor. And see if we can maybe keep that upper note sustained, because I think that's kind of cool. Oh yeah, and let's change this to A flat. Good, that sounds kind of Skyrim-ish. Now, that's the foundation. Now what we need to do is actually distribute this properly amongst the different players. There might be some divises, which is when we have certain sections split up. So we'll think about that as well. But we're basically just gonna use this as a reference. So to do that, I'm actually gonna open up the piano roll, and I'm going to disable the linking here. And that'll make sure this stays up all the time. So while I'm working, I have this as a reference point. Okay, now I'm just gonna keep the top note. Let's start with the top note. And I want everything here to be muted, so I'm going to activate the mutes on all of this, because that will give it that kind of strained, longing sound that I think Skyrim has pretty actively. In Cinematic Studio Series, the shortcut for activating the mutes is gonna be B0. And if you press it hard, it activates the mutes, and if you press it soft, it turns them off. So press it hard. Now the mute should be on for all these instruments. And I'm just gonna go right down the line and just record each one. So we're just gonna start with violin 1, which is mostly just gonna be an F, so it's gonna be the most boring one. Now, there's other ways you could do this. One way would be to copy paste across the sections, which I'll demonstrate how to do that a little bit. So we've got our violins. I'm going to do it with the basses. So for the basses, we're going to take one of the notes here. I know you can't see it because of the camera. We're going to copy like this. And then we're going to go over to the basses. And we're going to use paste at original position. I've talked about this a bunch of times in other videos, but check out that shortcut in Logic. It's a good one. Paste at original position. Okay, now we should have just the basses themselves here, like this. And we can copy that across sections as well too, make them legato, whatever we want to do. If we want the modulation, I'm actually going to grab the modulation from the violin 1 because I already recorded it and I think it should be fine. And again, paste at original position. We've got the modulation. So let's check these two, see how it sounds. Okay, nice. Now we need this at the octave as well. So we're going to duplicate the legato and we're going to pull it up. So we're going to have the basses working in divisi, meaning they're split. Make the basses a little bit louder. I still like that hushed feeling. It's really nice. Okay, now let's get some of the inner voicings. The inner voicings are working in two ways in this piece, if you notice in the original Far Horizons. So we have the sustains, but we also have some inner movement going on. It's very subtle, but I'm going to play it again so you can kind of hear it. Listen to the cello. It's very, very, very subtle. Also, I just noticed that the upper violins working in octaves, just like the basses are as well. So let's actually take violin 2 and pop that down the octave. May not actually work because of our register because we're in F, and this, I think, is out of the range. So let's instead actually give it to violas and see how that sounds. Nice. Okay, so let's fill in the inner voicings a little bit. And we're going to kind of experiment. So we're going to come up with some lines. We don't want it too active. We want it mostly active when the melody isn't active. And that's how we get that contrast. So we'll improvise a little bit. Not too bad. Let's start with that and see if we can work something with it. Okay, so I'm just doing my cleanup again, as usual. I like to do cleanup while I work. I just find it a little easier than trying to do it all at the end. Okay. I think this is a little off. Okay, now what we need to do now is if we've filled in these voicings, we actually don't need this for reference anymore. If we filled in these voicings, we have to now make sure that we're capturing whatever voice was missing. So we've got the active line, which is great, but we're still missing some important voicings. For example, in this opening string thing, we don't have our third, so nah, we're missing that note. So what we're going to do is we're kind of trying to determine what the voice is that's missing. Now, if we can't do it on the spot, I'm probably going to miss a few notes. We'll just fill it in later. Now, let's actually do this. Let's have... The problem that we have right now is that we were playing with the octaves, which is the reason why we gave it to viola. However, now it's not low enough for actually for us to capture this. So we're left with two choices. We either have to divide the violas to be able to grab some of these lower lines, like these Fs, or we modulate everything up. And that may have been why Jeremy Soule worked with G minor. So what I'm actually going to do is just modulate. I think some people don't realize that they can do this enough, that if you're running into orchestration issues, you might just need to modulate your piece a little bit just to make everything sit a little better. And there's nothing wrong with that. So this enables us to now put this in violin 2 or even violin 1 divisi if we want to. And now we have some room to work with the violas to have more counterpoint going on. Okay, so let's give it a try. Oh. All right, so that's not bad, but now we're getting this conflict of the two contrapuntal voices. So let's have the viola be a little less active. Maybe more active when the melody's playing. Okay, that's much better. Now my ear says to make this phrase right here, to make this next note bum instead of bum. Try again. Okay, that's pretty nice. I think I want to change that to bayum. So what we're going to do is we're going to just grab those notes afterwards, which you can totally do if you like the rhythms, but you want to change the pitches. And just drag them down. And let's actually make this that note so that we get that kind of sustain, suspension. So that's a great start, I think. Now, what I like to do is just check the voicings, just make sure that everything's acting nicely, and just look at all the voicings together. You'll see if there's any weird, like, clashing notes or anything like that. I think I want this violin 2 to jump up to D. That's nice. I think that's pretty darn good. Okay, now what we're going to use is some harp to just kind of add a little bit of inner movement at some of these points, just very subtly. Now, this is a custom harp that I made that I'm in the process of finishing up, and it's going to be available for sale on my website. So if you want to check that out, you can. I'll link that in the description. Shameless plug. Let's just have the harp activate there. Da 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 da. Let's do that. One more time. Actually, let's have it start on the offbeat. Nice subtle touch. And here. Obviously, the piece would continue here. Make that harp a little louder. Okay. Now, in the second half of this piece, let's kind of jump forward in the orchestration to have it do what Jeremy Soule had later, which was some trombone sustains and a little bit of a flute riff on the top, which I thought was really cool. Let's just kind of imitate that. Okay, that's really nice. And we're also going to add in, I think, either English horn or oboe to support the horn in the second half of that. It's kind of what he did in the later orchestration, I noticed. English horn is going to be a little lower, so it'll have a bit more of a singing, kind of pushing forward sound than the oboe. Depends on if we want that or not. Oboe will a little lower in its register, so it'll be a little different. Let's experiment and see. Yeah, see, that kind of clashes because they're both straining in that register. So let's work with something a little lower and see if that works a little better. Now, for me, that's not quite there either. So we're actually going to use trumpet. Trumpet and horn could blend kind of nicely in this register. Very quietly. See, I think that's actually really nice. I like that. So we're going to keep that. And then let's just have the trombones come in at the very end, that last phrase. Da-da. Just a little push. Maybe even there. Even less. Nice, very, very subtle. And let's see what else we can change. Maybe I'm wondering if maybe we drop this sustain in the violin 1 and have it join in with the horn and trumpet. Let's see. Nope, I actually like the sustain better. So this is how I work. I just like to experiment a little bit and see. Now let's add in a little percussion accent. We're gonna do a cymbal swell, I think. Right near at the half of the phrase and near the end, right when the harp is active. So we'll do right here. Okay, and that should do it. That's pretty darn good. If you wanted to bring this out a couple more steps and you wanted to add a little bit more interest, one thing that I would probably do is play with some synths, just for some very, very subtle ambience. So I would probably grab some sort of a very simple synth, something that's more pad-like. Let's see what this sounds like. See, even that is too active. So I use Omnisphere primarily, so let's just quickly grab something like, I believe there's a Heaven patch in here that's kind of nice. The Gates of Heaven. But it's too active, so let's disable something. Still too active. We need something really, really, really subtle. Maybe something like this. Okay. So let's just have this going very quietly. So you can hear the difference when it's not there. So I'm just bouncing this out now. Okay, so here it is with the pad. And then without it. Hear how the floor kind of drops a little bit. Okay, and then similarly what I want to add is very subtly a little bit of sub support for those basses. So we're going to take, this is just one of my standard sub basses I use. It's just like a sine wave. Okay? And we're going to take one of the contrabass lines. We're going to paste it over to the sub bass. Delete this automation because we don't need any of that. And we're going to just subtly layer it in. So this might be loud. It's too loud right now. But you hear the effect. Okay, so let's just bump this down a little bit. It also gives a little bit more punctuation to the bass, which I think is kind of cool, except for the beginning. I don't want that punch in the beginning, so I'm going to automate it to get louder. A little bit more subtle. So it eases in now. Let's see here. And there you go. That is how you write at least a little bit of music like Jeremy Soule. Now, I'm gonna include the MIDI for this in the description in my Patreon for all of you Patreon supporters, because I haven't put rewards up in a long time, and I appreciate all of you who have chosen to continue to support me there. If you'd like to join Patreon, you can. If you don't care about the rewards but you want to support me in some other way, you can buy me a coffee, which is also in the video description. And I'm going to link anything I chatted about in the video as well, like the harp, once it's available. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you got something out of this. If you did, you can leave a like, subscribe for more content like this. Please leave any suggestions in the comments because I love checking out new ideas from you all. And happy composing.